Hello, fifth grade. What I'd like you guys to do is if you have a blank piece of paper, this is what we need for today. So get a blank piece of paper out. And of course, at this time of this video, you may stop it at any time to catch up. Here's what I'd like you to do today is please get your piece of paper out, and I'd like you to go ahead and fold it over. So now you fold it into a half, and then you're going to fold it over again into a fourth. So when I open my piece of paper, I should have 4 windows, or 4 boxes. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, if you have this done, you guys can go ahead and continue with our video. We're going to go ahead and today we're going to talk about our CDB review. So we're going to review, we're actually going to review for the mock star. That's going to help us. So this should help you with the mock star. So let me go ahead and go to the next slide. And what today we're going to talk about understandings. So the first thing I want us to talk about is what is living and non-living. So we have living and non-living components. So a living is anything that was once living. So it could be a leaf that fell off of a tree is still living. Something that is non-living is things that do not have a cycle or do not have a life cycle particular, right? It does not have a life cycle. So a rock has a cycle, but it's non-living because it doesn't have a living cycle. Water, the same thing. It has a cycle, but it doesn't have a living cycle. So that's what makes it non-living. So if we take a look at some of these things on this list, and then we decide if it's living or non-living. So if I look at the boys list, it says a tree, a rock, and fire. Think about it just for a second. What is living and non-living? Good. 2 out of the 3 are non-living. You should have said a rock and fire are non-living, but a tree is living. Okay, let's go to the girls list. How about an egg in an egg carton? Bacteria in the cell. What do you think? Okay, good. If you said 2 out of the 3 are living, you're 100% correct. The egg in an egg carton is non-living. A bacteria is living because it's growing. Cells in our bodies are growing, so that would be considered living. And it's part of a cycle, cells are, in bacteria. So all of those things, 2 out of the 3 of them are living. Excellent. Okay. Good. All right, so living and non-living. Another thing that we're going to talk about is food chains. I know that we've been talking a lot about food chains lately, but a food chain, where's something that's missing in this food chain? What do you think it is? The sun. Absolutely. If you said the sun, you're 100% correct. We are missing the sun. We needed the sun in order to make a producer. A producer is any type of plant that makes its own food. And it does this through photosynthesis. It does through the sun energy. Through the sun energy, it creates carbon dioxide, and it goes through the plants, and then it gives it off nutrients, and from that nutrient, it creates oxygen. So it's creating its own food. Producers are. Producers, remember what this little arrow means? Gives energy to. If you said it, excellent. Good. Producers give energy to consumers. Consumers give energy to another consumer, which is a prey, right? This would be prey, and this would be a predator. And then this consumer gives energy to another consumer, which is its predator for its prey. And then the same thing, this consumer gives energy to another consumer, which is the top of the food chain, and that is also considered giving energy to. Okay, so all of these are producers and then consumers, but they also have different names, which is a producer is still a producer, but this grasshopper only eats grass, so it's called a herbivore. One of these ways that you can remember herbivore is herbs. It only eats herbs, which are plants. Herbivore. And then the next one, this animal only eats meat, and actually some frogs will eat meat and vegetables or meat and plants. And this one is considered a herbivore. Carnivore. This one right here is a carnivore. So we're just going to say carnivore, which only eats meat, which eats that grasshopper. This snake is also just a carnivore, which only eats meat. And then this eagle is only a carnivore, which only eats meat. This carnivore actually can eventually die because he's the top of the food chain, and he can decompose. He can become a decomposer. And when he becomes a decomposer, that means he's in the soil. He becomes part of the soil, and then he can grow a bacteria or fungi, and then other plants will be able to, and then other animals will be able to consume from him. So this guy right here also could be a decomposer when he dies. Okay, so let's talk about our food chains, because our food webs. This is our one big thing that we had on our CDB, which we kind of struggled with. So let's go over some of our food chains today, or food web. So when a food web, what are we missing here? The sun. We should have said the sun. It always starts with the sun. And again, the arrows mean the same thing, gives energy to. So we see this marsh grass, it gives energy to the grasshopper. This grasshopper gives energy to the shrew, and the shrew gives energy to the snake or the hawk, depending on what he decides to eat. Whatever this predator catches, whatever prey it catches. Same with this one. So this also it starts with two type of producers, and the other producer is a cattail. And before you even look at the question, you guys want to look and follow the arrows and see what's happening in your food web. So we have this one that has cattails. Cattails gives energy to the cricket. The cricket gives energy to either the frog or the shrew. And the frog gives energy to the snake. And then the snake gives energy to the hawk. Or we could start out with the cattail that gives energy to the cricket. The cricket gives energy to the shrew. The shrew gives energy to the hawk. See, there's multiple paths with the food web. Okay, let's read the question and kind of talk about the question. A particular food web is shown. What statement correctly describes the transfer of energy in a food chain in its wetland? So we're looking at which statement correctly describes the transfer of energy. So let's look at F. Energy is transferred from hawks to shrew to grasshopper to marshlands. G. Energy is transferred from marsh grass, to crickets. Nope, that one's definitely not right. The other one was going the opposite direction, so that's not right. So let's look at H. Energy is transferred from grasshopper, so there's grasshopper, to cricket. Doesn't look like that happens, right? This doesn't go to there. There's no arrow pointing to it, so that's not right. Energy is transferred from the cattail to the cricket to the shrew to the hawk. That one seems like the winner, right? That's the one that mostly makes sense. It's going into the right direction. So J is going to be your correct answer. Make sure you follow the arrows in order to find the correct answer. Remember that arrow means give energy to. Okay, we're going to do one more because the food web can also be shown like this, with just words and not pictures. So what you're looking for, if it's a producer, you're going to look for seeds, leaves. It could be an oak. Some of those words may help you a little bit to understand that that is a producer. And they always start with a producer. Well, where's the sun? We need that sun, but they don't have it on here. Make sure that you know that starts with the sun. Sun, and then you have a producer. So this is a comfort leaf that goes to the blue grouse, and then the northern goosehawks. Or the leaf goes to an elk, and then it goes directly to a wolf, the wolves. Or you can start with the comfort seeds, and then it goes to the red crossbills, to the sharp-shined hawks, to the northern goosehawks, and then to the wolves. In this food chain, in this food web, energy is transferred directly between A, comfort seeds and the crossbills. That may be right? Because it is showing energy being transferred. So we'll go ahead and think that A might be a maybe. Remember, when I take a test, I want to go through all of them. This one says the leaf, and then through the grousehawk. What about the blue grouse? That's not right. So B is definitely not right, because you have to remember that there's something else that's getting energy before it. So then we also say the blue grouse to the wolf. Nope, we still need to go through the northern goosehawks. Then you have the elk, that the sharp shine. Oh no, that's on the opposite side of the food web, and there's no arrow being transferred, so that's definitely not right. So your best answer on this one is going to be A. It transfers from the Crawford seeds to the red crossbills. Make sure you look and draw those arrows. Good job. Okay, so the next one we're going to talk about is, we talked about food webs. Now we talk about structures. Remember, structures are all about adaptation. How does a plant and animal physically change to fit their environment? A structure is how they physically adapt to their environment. So if we look in this picture, we can see that there are a lot of animals interacting in this environment. We see the sun in the heat. We see the sun and the heat that are coming down. That's helping the environment, helping those plants grow. So you see plants, you see insects that are in this environment. You see that there are plants. And then in this is kind of like a wetland, it looks like, because you have cattails in here, and you have lilies. And look, a fungi in a rotting log. So let's take a look, just a few moments on how the plants adapt. So plants adapt by getting water, having roots. So we look carefully, all these plants have different roots, and that's in order to stabilize the plant from getting harmed. It also gets its moisture or its water. So this one's, some plants are in the water. Some plants are trying to go out of the water, like this cactus, in order to survive. The taller, so they can get more sunlight to help them grow. The reason the shape of the leaves, you want to carefully look at the shape of the leaves. Like this leaf right here, this leaf is nice and flat and long, so it can create a structure for an animal to live on. It also has deep roots that come down. So let's take a look at these plants. And this was on our CDB, and this was a hard question. So let's take a look. These are two different types of plants that are in different environments. So they live in different environments. There's a pine tree. So when you think of a pine tree, you should think of a Christmas tree, because that's where we mainly see these types of trees. These usually live in the north. And then this is a barrel cactus. So you'll see a lot more of these type of cactuses here in Texas. So these two plants have different structures. So that means they have different adaptations for their environments. Cactuses, you can tell that they have those spikes. And if you remember correctly, we talked about how the spikes can protect them. These little, they can protect them from any type of predators. And then we see that this one, this pine tree, has really thin, really itty bitty thin needles. And that can help with moisture, getting moisture. It can also, it can help from not drying it out as easily. That's why pine trees sometimes are really good for Christmas trees, because they don't dry out. Okay, how do structures of these plants likely help them survive in their environments? So let's take a look at each of these questions. A, it says the thin shape of the pine leaves, which are right here, the thin shapes of the pine leaves, help them shed snow in the winter. Do you think that they shed snow in the winter? No, I don't think so either. They don't really shed snow, right? So that doesn't seem right. They actually will pile on snow, and the branches are nice and thick and heavy to be able to keep the snow on them. But they're probably not going to shed snow. The next one is the border round shape of the barrel cactus helps to absorb nutrition in the air. I'm not sure if that's 100% correct, but I do think that it could definitely help it. This one, A, wouldn't be right because it doesn't shed snow. So we're going to go ahead and cross that one out. So let's look at B. The thin shape of the pine leaves help them attract birds and insects. That could be a possible answer. They might be able to help them with shelter. They might help birds and insects, but that's not going to be a structure, and that's where they get you. That's not going to be a structure. A structure is how they adapted, how the plants adapted, and that doesn't show an adaptation. So we're going to go ahead and cross that one off. Let's look at C. The thin shape of the pine leaves help them prevent water loss. Maybe that's a way that they can survive, right? Is water loss, they'll help them prevent water loss. Remember, it's about how these plants are going to survive. Yeah, that'll help them keep their water in. Let's look at the cactus. The barrel cactus helps them retain water because of the shape of the round shape. Both of those things would help you adapt, show a structure. So that's a possible answer because it's showing how they adapted to their environment. These two did not show how they adapt to their environment. The thin shape of the pine leaf helps them catch rainwater. Well, that might help too, right? That would help them adapt. And then this one right here, to avoid being eaten. So I could see how C and D are some of the harder ones because this is also protection. That barrel cactus is also protection. So this answer is going to actually be, and I'm sure that you guys have already went over this with your teachers because you have wonderful teachers, which is C. Because it's mainly going to show how it prevents the water loss. This one, I don't think it catches rain. If I look at it, that's going to be really hard to catch rain. So that was the biggest difference. So C is going to be your correct answer. It's going to help prevent water loss. And then your cactus is going to help you retain water, which keep the water. Very good. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and we're going to start on our foldable. But let's go ahead and get up for a second because we've been sitting for a while listening to Miss McGuire. My goodness. Okay, so I have a video for you.
Weathering is breaking, erosion is moving, deposition's dropping.
So it's
weathering is breaking,
erosion is moving, and deposition's dropping. Okay, so that's what I want you guys to do is weathering is breaking, erosion is moving, deposition's dropping. Those are some ways that help you remember WED. WED is very important because it starts with a lot of processes. So one of the processes is the process of a rock. It's process of how a rock can break down and move and cause new land and new landforms. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing here. I'm going to go ahead and share right here. There we go. Okay, so I want you guys to get your foldable out. Again, you may pause this video at any time If I go too fast, please go ahead and stop the video and write it down. So here's what I want you to write down. Process of a rock. And then I want you to write WED. WED is going to help you remember weathering, erosion, and deposition. So remember, weathering. What does weathering do? It breaks it. So you're going to write down breaks it. And then erosion is the next one. Erosion moves it. And then deposition drops it. And this word it is all sediment. So when they say the word it, it's taking little pieces of that rock. It is considered sediment. Little pieces of sand, soil, and rock. Okay, make sure you guys have this written down for me, please. This will help you remember weathering. And now weathering is going to start weathering, erosion, and deposition. This is going to start off. It's going to start off when we start talking about important things like how land changes. So these are all the agents of change. The agents of change are ice, wind, and water. And they're all formed from weathering, erosion, and deposition. So let's look at this question. The size and shape of a delta can change over time. So how is a delta formed? So through weathering, erosion, and deposition of a rock, right? Of sediment, right? And that's how they're formed, but mainly through water. The agents of change is through water. As you can see, all of this is formed through water, and this is called a delta. The size and shape of this delta over time is not likely to change by, what is it not? Okay, so there's your key word. What is it not changing by? So F. The number and height of tides along the shore. Do you think that's how it's going to change this delta? Maybe, right? Maybe might change it. Which one's not likely to change it? Maybe. How about G? The amount and size of sediment carried by the rivers and streams. Does that change a sediment? Is that going to change the land? Yes, that's erosion. Erosion is the amount of size and sediment that changed over time. This that's been carried over by streams and rivers and streams, excuse me. And that one would definitely be this one would definitely form a delta. What else is not likely going to change it? This one also talks about tides. Do you think tides, like the river, do you think the ocean will change it over time? Yeah, I kind of think so, right? Let's go to the next one. How about H? The amount of hunting and fishing in a delta? Is that going to change what this looks like? Maybe not. Let's take a look. How about the number and size of waves from the ocean that reach the shore? That might change, right? That's going to carry that sediment. So anything that's happening out in the ocean and moving it forward is going to change it. Anything that's over from this river and lakes and streams, that's going to change it. The only things that don't change it is the amount of hunting and fishing in that delta. All right, good. All right, so as we were talking about weathering, erosion, and deposition, we also should start talking about how sediment rocks are formed. Sediment rocks are formed because of weathering, erosion, and deposition. That's how it begins. It always starts with weathering, erosion, deposition. Then it goes with compaction. Compaction means that it is heat and pressure and sediment building on top of each other. And then after a while, there's sediment. Sediment kind of glues it together to form a sedimentary rock. So weathering, erosion, deposition, then compaction, all the layers of soil, and then sediment where they're keeping together, they're staying together. And that is the final product of a sedimentary rock. Okay, let's go ahead and go back to our foldable. We're going to go ahead and write down sedimentary rocks. I'm going to go ahead and go a little bit farther in. Let me go ahead and try to zoom in a little bit so you guys can see it a little bit better. There we are. Okay, so this next one, you're going to go ahead and write down sedimentary rocks. So sedimentary rock. And it always begins with erosion, weathering, erosion, and deposition. And then it starts with our sediment rock that's going with weathering, erosion, deposition. Then what happens is it forms a sediment layers. So sediment layers, which will eventually might be conglomeration maybe, or might form limestone over time. But then we keep piling on layers and layers, and this happens over millions and millions of years. So this does not happen. This is why this is non-renewable. It takes a long time for this to happen. And then I'm going to go ahead, and what's happening is the heat and pressure come down on it. So you have heat and pressure, which will form compaction. So heat and pressure, which forms compaction on here. And then it'll cement together. So they'll stay together, and that's sedimentation. It's okay if you use the back or another piece of paper if you need to write all these details down. Okay, so then we had sedimentary rocks. So let's go ahead and look at this diagram. The diagram below shows the sequence of the processes that turn solid rock into sandstone. So first it starts with solid rock, and then it goes weathering, erosion, and deposition like we just talked about, right? And then it'll go to beach sand. And what else is going to be here to make it sandstone? What part are we missing? So go back to here. We had a weathering, erosion, deposition. What parts did we miss before it becomes sandstone? Which two processes best complete this diagram? Melting and cooling? Does that make sense for our sedimentary rocks? Erosion and compaction. Look, they have compaction. That may be a key word. But look, they already have erosion. We don't need that. It already has it over here. So that doesn't make sense. How about compaction and sedimentation? Maybe, right? That's not on there. And look, we go back to ours. We need weathering, erosion, deposition, and compaction, and then sedimentation to make it. How about evaporation and dissolving? No, that doesn't make sense, right? That has nothing to do with what we're talking about with this diagram. The best answer is going to be C, compaction and sedimentation. That's what we're missing here. So if you said C, you're 100% correct. Good job. All right, let's do the next one. So let's talk about fossil fuels. So we talk about sedimentary rock. That's forming a rock. Fossil fuel fermentation, which means that we're forming how fossil fuels are created and how they're formed over time. So this is something we've talked about a lot. We talk about how it always starts. So we talk about fossil fuel. There's two different types of fossil fuel that we really talk about. Actually, three, I guess. The first one we always talk about coal. And coal is always formed from swampy plants. Swampy areas. Think about the swampiest area with those swampy old leaves. And so organisms. So you want to think about organic materials. So you think about plants and animals, or organic materials, or organisms. So it always starts with that. And then what happens over time is it always becomes dead plants and animals. And then over millions and millions of years, this is also non-renewable. It takes a long time for it to happen. Then you have piles of sediments, piles of rocks and sand, and then it keeps going, it keeps building up, right? And then eventually heat and pressure, heat and pressure, heat and pressure is what's going to form that rock. And we have to dig for it. So non-renewable, we always dig for it. We have to dig for it, like the coal. We're going to have to dig for it. Or oil, or natural gas. So oil, natural gas, and coal, we're all going to have to dig for. The difference between coal and oil and natural gas is mainly natural gas is made out of ocean animals. So think about plankton and algae. Those are old, ancient organisms. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back to our foldable. Let's go ahead and add the formation of our fossil fuels to our foldable. So I'm just going to put it next to my sedimentary rock. If you don't have room for it, I understand if you want to go to the next box. That is okay, because you can always flip this over if you need to. So fossil fuels. I'm going to put a little shovel just to remind me. I got to dig for it. And what happens, it's always formed. I'm going to show you two different kinds. So we have coal, which is a fossil fuel, and we have oil, natural gas. Those are fossil fuels. And then we have coal. Coal always starts out with swampy animals. This is what makes coal for us. So we have swampy plants and animals, what are called organic matter. This is organic matter. And then the layers start, and then millions and millions of years. So then you start getting layers and layers and layers of sediments. So all these layers right here are sediment. And then after you have the sediment, and then you get heat and pressure, heat and pressure. Again, this is millions of years. And both of these take millions of years. But you need heat and pressure in order to form fossil fuels. But the main important part is you need, for coal, you need that swampy plant. Again, this is organic matter. So organic matter here, organic matter here. The next one is, now we need ocean animals for oil and natural gas. This is ancient. We're just going to put, this is ocean. We're going to put ocean animals. They're ancient remains. Ancient animals. So we put ocean animals. Ocean organisms, so I'll go ahead and put, because they're plants and animals. And then again, this is what's going to form over time. This is coal, sorry. And then right here you have a thin layer of oil or natural gas. And again, then we have sediment, 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 layers and layers of sediment. Layers and layers of sediments. And again, heat and pressure, heat and pressure, heat and pressure. That's what's going to form that fossil fuel. All right, we're going to go ahead and stop right there on fossil fuels. Okay. And again, mainly important is that heat and pressure, millions of years, and out of organic materials, organic matter. Okay, so on this one it says, the photo shows plants growing on the surface of a pond. So this is all the surface of the pond. How do plants like these form from fossil fuels? How do they form from fossil fuels? It's in a pond, okay, and these are plants. So it probably forms what? Coal, right? Could form coal. It seems like coal since it's swampy, since it's from a pond. It's dead plants. So F, let's read and see how this could form into fossil fuel. The dead plants sink to the bottom of the pond and they get buried by sediments for millions of years. That's a good answer. So let's go ahead and keep that F. That's a good answer because if we go back to fossil fuels, that's exactly what happens. Is they die and they go to the bottom, and then again they get carried with sediment. They get buried with sediment. G, the dead plants are buried for millions of years, forming fossil fuels that attract carbon. Those also get buried. But it doesn't talk about anything about how the sediment, or the heat and pressure that happens. How about the dead plants sink to the bottom of the pond and are consumed by decomposers? I think they're thinking about food chains here, right? With the decomposers. Definitely not with fossil fuels. How about J? The dead plants produce carbon that is consumed by fish, which form fossils. I think they're confusing on how to form fossils, right? And actually, that's not, carbon doesn't make it fish to form fossils. They actually get stuck into a fossil and they form it. So that's a little different. So your answer would probably be, the best answer is probably F. If you said F, you're 100% correct. They're getting buried, so it becomes dead plants and animals, and then just keeps getting buried with sediments. And then it adds heat and pressure over millions of years. And that's what forms those fossil fuels that we care so much about to help us with energy. Okay, the next part that we have is refraction. Okay, friends, fraction is a hard, but when you think about light, light bends. When you think of refraction, you should be thinking about how light bends and how we see it, how it's small and then gets bigger when it's changed. How it's small gets bigger when it changes. Reflection bounces. So reflection is kind of the opposite of what we see, right? And what happens is the light bounces. So it bounces off of an object. All right, so let's go ahead and put this on our foldable. Let's go back to our foldable. Now go to the next box. If you already used the other box, that's okay. You just keep following along, please. So you're going to put reflection. Reflection bounces. So I'm going to draw a mirror, and I'm going to show light being bounced. Bounced off of it. It bounces off of it. That's how light is formed, and we're going to put bounces as our keyword. And I'm going to write the word reflection backwards. And of course, you can pause the video at any time to do this. Reflect. So reflect means that it's bouncing, showing the opposite. So that's why we need to wear shirts and we show a different reflection in the mirror. That's why it looks opposite, because it bounces off of that light. Okay, then the next one is refraction. So refraction, what it happens is it bends, right? So anytime that we see this, we should see the word refraction. Refraction bends and gets smaller to bigger. So refraction. I'm going to make it bend. And again, they show a light. and it gets smaller and then gets wider. It always looks bigger in the water, doesn't it? That's why it's refraction, because it bends. Okay, go ahead and try to write those words down. If you need to pause the video, excuse me, friends, I'm sorry. I didn't see that I wasn't up all the way. Go ahead and take a minute to write everything else down. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop it there just for a second. You may stop the video and write those words down if you needed to. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about this. It says, a student conducts an investigation by shining a flashlight towards a flat mirror. The student changes the angle of the mirror to observe the path of the reflection. As the mirror changes direction, the light reaches the mirror that can reach the ceiling because the light, what does the light do? The light travels in a straight line and then reflects off the surface of the mirror. G, the refracts in the glass of the mirror and then it spreads out all over the room. H, enters the mirror and then changes direction when it is reflected by the back of the mirror. J, travels through the air and does not change its direction. If you said F, you're 100% correct. So light always travels in a straight line, and then on a mirror, it will reflect. So it will reflect to whatever direction you change this mirror. So F is 100% correct. Good. And then refraction would be where it bends to the direction, so it always makes the light look bigger. All right, so you guys have probably talked about conductors and insulators. We talked about conductors and insulators when we talk about circuits. So we're going to go ahead and talk about circuits. The object that conducts electrical energy will close a complete circuit and allow energy to flow through. So when we have circuits, a complete circuit is where we start with the battery, it starts with the positive side, and then it goes through to the light, goes all the way through, and then goes through the negative charge of the battery. And that is a complete circuit. There's nothing interrupting it. There's no insulators, just conductors. Insulators will stop the flow of electricity. Conductors will allow the electricity to flow through. So an insulator, objects that insulate electrical energy, will not close. It'll be an open circuit. So this is an open circuit. It'll stop the flow of electricity. So this has a broken line in it, so it's stopping the flow of electricity. It stops it right there. It won't flow anymore. That's called an open circuit. So when we looked at circuits like this, which will work in this circuit? Will anything work? So we have our battery. And again, what you need to do is you need to go through here and you have to travel the path. And keep traveling the path in order to see if there's anything that's broken in the line. If there's something broken in the line, then we know we can no longer stop. It'll stop the flow of electricity. So here's a switch. What does the switch have to do to flow electricity through it? If you said close, you're right. This switch has to be closed. So will the circuit work? Nope. There's parts of it that will not work. This part right here will not work. So light bulb 2 will not turn on because it has an open switch. That switch needs to be closed in order to have the flow of electricity. So right here, when I start on the positive side, I go through my light bulb, come back down. Oh, there we go. That would work. Light bulb 1 would work. But then when I go to the second path, it's going to stop right here. It will not allow electricity to flow through because everything has to be able, I should be able to go through the whole path without any insulators, without any interruptions. And that would be considered, that's going to be considered an open circuit. So you may come across a question like this, where you have to observe all these different paths. The trick is to go ahead and follow the path with your pencil. So you start with the positive side of the battery. Always start with the battery. And then we keep going. It looks like this flow is good. This blue light bulb would probably turn on. And then if I go to this path right here, this bell would probably turn on. Oh, but then we would stop right here. Because look, that switch is on. That switch is open and not closed. If it was closed, then I could continue electricity flow. But unfortunately, it wasn't able to make all the way around, so there's nothing that is working right now. So we had to stop there. But let's see the second path. So start right here and go through the blue bulb. I keep going, keep going. Oh, that's also open. It needs to be closed. Switch 2 also needs to be closed. So neither one of these will turn on because I don't have a flow of electricity. So it says all the bulbs will function. Will they function? No. Will both the blue bulbs, will they function? The blue bulbs? Nope. Both blue bulbs and the light will function. Okay, if it says, what will happen if switch 2 is closed? If switch 2 is closed and switch 1 is open. So let's pretend that we close switch 2. So we start on that battery, and then we go with the blue bulb, and keep going, keep going, keep going. This is closed, so it'll allow the electricity to flow through. Keep going, so this blue bulb will turn back on. Which bulbs turned on? Good, both the blue bulbs. So this would be my only correct answer. B would be my only correct answer. Both bulbs will turn on. Very good. Okay, you guys talked about force. The last question I had for you guys on force was there's different kinds of force, a push and a pull. A push and a pull. And there's also when you magnetize something, that's also a force that can show a push and a pull. Gravity, when something falls, that's also a push or a pull. And then friction. Friction, how it stops or slows something down. So let's take a look. This is our spring scale that we used that one time in the lab. This is a diagram showing two different trials of the spring scales that can use to measure force. So here's our spring trial, our first one, and here's our second one. This experiment can determine what? What can this determine? If we look carefully at the scale, this is over here. It's not using much force. This is using a little bit more force. So how does that help us? How much affects the force needs to move an object? So what is this investigation telling us? How mass affects the force needed to move objects? Maybe B. How force affects the mass of two objects? Well, there's more than two. How the force used to pull a dictionary affects the mass of the box of marbles. I don't know about that. And D. How the mass of the box of marbles affects the mass of the dictionary. So it does show how much force is needed to move the object. But doing the science experiment, it shows that you're going to need more force, right? This has more mass, which is going to provide more force. So how the mass of a box of marbles affects the mass of the dictionary. How the force used to pull a dictionary affects the mass of the box of marbles. This right here would be D. How the mass of a box of marbles affects the mass of a dictionary.